Deep in the Alban Hills, about 20 miles south of Rome, lies a small, circular lake. It is volcanic, deep, and unnaturally still. For thousands of years, the locals called it the Mirror of Diana, named after the goddess of the hunt and the moon. But for centuries, the fishermen who worked these waters whispered of something else, something sleeping beneath the silt. They told stories of nets getting snagged on massive wooden beams. Sometimes they would pull up inexplicable treasures, pieces of bronze, mosaics, or splintered wood that looked far too old to be part of any fishing boat. They said there were giants sleeping in the deep. For a long time, historians dismissed these stories as peasant folklore. Rome was known for its roads, its aqueducts, and its armies, not for building massive ships inside tiny volcanic craters. It made no sense. Why would anyone build a fleet of ships on a lake that goes nowhere? But the rumors persisted, and in the late 1920s, they reached the ears of a man who was obsessed with the glory of ancient Rome, the Italian dictator Benito Mussolini. Mussolini didn't just want to find artifacts. He wanted to resurrect the Roman Empire. He believed the legends. And in a display of sheer totalitarian will, he ordered an engineering project that rivaled the ancients themselves. He didn't send divers down. He ordered the engineers to drain the lake. They reactivated an ancient Roman drainage tunnel cut through the mountain, using massive modern pumps to accelerate the process. Slowly, agonizingly, the water level began to drop. As the mud was exposed to the sunlight for the first time in nearly 2,000 years, the workers saw shapes emerging from the slime. First, a railing, then a deck, then a hull that seemed to go on forever. The skeptics were silenced. The fishermen were right. Resting on the bottom of Lake Nemi were two ships of impossible size. They were longer than modern football fields. They were wider than any merchant vessel of the ancient world. But as the archaeologists scrubbed away the mud, they realized these weren't warships. They weren't cargo ships. They were floating palaces. And stamped on the lead pipes of the plumbing system was the name of the owner, Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus. The world knows him by a different name, the Mad Emperor, Caligula. To understand why these ships existed, you have to understand the mind of the man who commissioned them. Caligula is perhaps the most infamous villain in human history. We are told he was insane. We are told he made his horse a senator, that he declared war on the ocean, and that he thought he was a living god. By the year 37 AD, Caligula was tired of Rome. He was tired of the Senate, tired of the politics, and tired of the prying eyes of the public. He wanted a sanctuary. He wanted a place where he could indulge in his darkest fantasies and his obsession with the Egyptian goddess Isis without judgment. Lake Nemi was perfect. It was sacred, secluded, and silent. He ordered the construction of two massive vessels, known today simply as the Prima and the Seconda. The first ship was designed as a floating temple to Diana and Isis. The second was a floating pleasure palace. But calling them ships is an insult. These were engineering marvels that defied the logic of their time. Imagine the cost. Rome's treasury was being drained to float these behemoths on a lake that is only 1 mile across. Thousands of shipbuilders, artisans, and slaves were hauled up the mountains to work on the project. They used wood from all over the empire, fir, pine, and oak. Caligula didn't just want luxury, he wanted dominance. He wanted to prove that he could tame nature itself. If the land wasn't big enough for his parties, he would build his own land on the water. For a brief window of time, about 3 or 4 years, these ships were the center of the world for the emperor. They were the stage for the infamous orgies that history books are too polite to describe in detail. They were places where senators were forced to serve slaves, where morality was inverted, and where Caligula played God. Let's step on board. Imagine you are a guest of the emperor in 40 AD. As you approach the Seconda ship, you aren't climbing a rope ladder. You are walking onto a marble terrace. The deck is not made of rough wood. It is paved with mosaics of colored stone imported from Greece and Egypt. Above you, giant sails made of purple silk ripple in the wind. Purple dye was worth its weight in gold in ancient Rome, extracted from thousands of sea snails. To use it for sails was a display of wealth so obscene it would be like paving a driveway with diamonds today. On the deck, there are gardens, real gardens. Caligula had fruit trees and grapevines planted in soil on the ship, irrigated by complex piping systems. He created a portable Eden. The superstructure of the ship wasn't a cabin, it was a mansion. There were banquet halls with alabaster walls. There were sleeping quarters decorated with gold leaf and ivory. There were baths, hot and cold, fed by running water. This was the boat of sin that the ancient historians hated. They wrote about the days-long parties, the incestuous acts, and the cruelty. They described how Caligula would invite noble families on board, only to humiliate them while drifting in the middle of the silent lake, where no screams could be heard from the shore. But while the historians focused on the scandal, they missed the most shocking part of the discovery. When Mussolini's engineers analyzed the wreckage in the 1930s, they stopped caring about the gold. They were staring at the machinery. The Nemi ships completely rewrote the history of technology. Before their discovery, we believed that the Dark Ages had wiped out most ancient knowledge, but we also assumed that the Romans were limited. We thought they were great builders of stone, but not great mechanics. The Nemi ships proved us wrong. First, there were the anchors. Archaeologists found an anchor made of iron encased in wood, a design that the British Admiralty claimed to have invented in 1841. Caligula had it 1800 years earlier. Then there were the pumps. The ships were equipped with a crank and piston pump system to clear bilge water. It was a design so advanced that history wouldn't see it again until the Renaissance. But the discovery that truly shocked the world was the ball bearings. Deep in the mud, divers found wooden platforms supported by bronze spheres. At first, they didn't know what they were looking at. Then they realized. These were rotating platforms. The Romans had invented ball bearings. This is a technology that we associate with Leonardo da Vinci or the Industrial Revolution. Yet, here it was, used to rotate massive statues of the gods, or perhaps a rotating dining floor, allowing the emperor to change his view while he ate. They found advanced valve systems for plumbing that looked exactly like the valves you have in your bathroom today. Conical valves that could control water flow with precision. They found evidence of a hypocaust system, underfloor heating, built into a wooden ship. Think about the risk. Putting a fire-based heating system inside a wooden vessel requires an insane level of confidence in your engineering. These ships proved that the Romans were on the verge of an industrial revolution. They had the mechanics, they had the physics, they had the materials. But instead of using this technology to build factories or modernize the world, It was used for the toys of a madman. It was used to rotate a statue of Diana while Caligula drank wine. So, where are these ships now? If they were recovered, if they were so magnificent, why can't you go see them in a museum in Rome today? This is the final, tragic twist of the story. After Mussolini drained the lake, a massive museum was built right on the shore to house the two hulls. It was a triumph of archaeology. For the first time, the world could see the scale of Roman naval engineering. But the ships had survived the mud for 2,000 years, only to face a more destructive force: modern warfare. In 1944, Italy was a battleground. The Allies were pushing north. The German Nazis were retreating. The Nemi Museum was caught in the crossfire. On the night of May 31st, 1944, the U.S. artillery was shelling the area, targeting a German anti-aircraft battery near the lake. But the real destruction came from the ground. According to reports, the German soldiers, retreating and bitter, decided to practice a scorched earth policy. They didn't want to leave anything of value for the Allies. Smoke began to pour from the museum windows. The ancient wood, dried out after centuries underwater and treated with preservatives, was essentially perfect kindling. The fire raged. It was an inferno that burned for days. When the smoke cleared, the Nemi ships were gone. The bronzes survived, some nails survived, but the hulls, the majestic floating palaces, they were reduced to piles of ash. We lost them. After 2,000 years of waiting, we held them in our hands for just over a decade, and then we burned them. Today, if you visit the museum at Lake Nemi, you will see 1:5 scale models. You will see the few bronze wolf heads and lion heads that were saved, but the giants are gone. The story of Caligula's ships forces us to look at history differently. We often think of the past as a straight line of progress. We think we are smarter than the ancients, but the Nemi ships prove that progress is fragile. Technology can be lost. Knowledge can be buried in the mud and forgotten. Caligula was a monster, yes, but he was also a patron of brilliance. His madness pushed his engineers to do the impossible. He demanded that they defy nature, and in doing so, they created technologies that wouldn't be reinvented for a millennium and a half. It makes you wonder, what else is down there? What other impossible machines are sleeping in the mud of the Mediterranean, waiting for us to find them? Or have we already found them and destroyed them, just like the Nemi ships? Was Caligula merely a madman? Or was he a visionary whose reputation was destroyed by the very people who murdered him? The senators who killed him had every reason to paint him as a demon. But demons don't usually build ships with ball bearings and heated floors. Whatever the truth, the Nemi ships remain a ghost story, a story of genius, excess, and ultimate destruction. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the lost technologies of the ancient world, make sure you're subscribed. We're going to keep digging up the secrets they tried to hide. And speaking of Roman cruelty, if you think Caligula was bad, you haven't seen anything yet. The Romans had specific punishments for every crime, and some of them are so brutal they make modern horror movies look like cartoons. Click right here to watch that video. I'll see you there.